session of council will begin at that time. So if I could just ask you to rise at this moment in time if you are able, and we will start with the procession to administer the oath. I'd like to introduce Judge Couto, who's going to give the oath of office to Councillor Neal Nicholson.
Judge. Mr. Nicholson, I'm going to ask you to repeat after me the oath of office. I, Neal Nicholson.
I, Neal Nicholson.
Do swear.
Do swear.
That I am qualified to hold the office of Councillor.
That I am qualified to hold the office of Councillor.
For the city of Coquitlam.
For the city of Coquitlam.
To which I have been elected.
To which I have been elected.
I have not by myself.
I have not by myself.
Or any other person.
Or any other person.
Knowingly contravened.
Knowingly contravened.
The community charter.
The community charter.
Respecting vote buying.
Respecting vote buying.
Or intimidation.
Or intimidation.
In relation to my election to the office.
In relation to my election to the office.
I will faithfully perform.
I will faithfully perform.
The duties of my office.
The duties of my office.
And will not allow any private interest.
And will not allow any private interest.
To influence my conduct.
To influence my conduct.
In public matters.
In public matters.
As required by the community charter.
As required by the community charter.
I will disclose any direct.
I will disclose any direct.
Or indirect financial interest.
Or indirect financial interest.
I have in a matter.
I have in a matter.
And will not participate.
And will not participate.
In the discussion of the matter.
In the discussion of the matter.
And will not vote.
And will not vote.
In respect to that matter.
In respect to that matter.
And I will abide by my duty.
I will abide by my duty.
To respect the confidentiality.
To respect the confidentiality.
Of any records held in confidence.
Of any records held in confidence.
By the city of Coquitlam.
By the city of Coquitlam.
Until the record is released.
Until the record is released.
To the public.
To the public.
As lawfully authorized or required.
As lawfully authorized or required.
And any part of a council meeting.
And any part of a council meeting.
Or council committee meeting.
Or council committee meeting.
That was lawfully closed to the public.
That was lawfully closed to the public.
Until the council or committee.
Until the council or committee.
Discusses the information.
Discusses the information.
At a meeting.
At a meeting.
That is open to the public.
That is open to the public.
Or releases the information.
Or releases the information.
To the public.
To the public.
Right. Congratulations, Councillor.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to welcome our new councillor, Neal Nicholson. You might as well. While Councillor Nicholson takes his seat. On behalf of Council, I do want to extend our welcome. Councillor Nicholson was with us before, and he's back again. We're grateful that he's here with us, and happy that he's able to join us at his inaugural meeting. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first item on the agenda is the adoption of minutes. It's the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, May 17th, and the recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Robinson. I have one correction, if I could. On the by-election results, the first paragraph, it says that staff and residents who were involved in the by-election were acknowledged. And I want to add to that, for the organization, the long hours, and all of the challenges that they overcame in running both a by-election and 2 non-binding referendum-style questions, and they did it very well. That may not pass, but I'm sure it will be appreciated.
Thank you, Your Worship.
The question is the minutes. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is the minutes of the Land Use and Economic Development Standing Committee meeting of Monday, May 17th. The recommendation is that these minutes be received.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
The item of business arising out of those minutes is the consideration of the authorization for the issuance of a development permit for a car wash and oil change centre at 858 Westwood Street. The recommendation is that Council approve the signing and sealing of this permit and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it on behalf of the City, subject to the hours of operation being restricted from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. daily through a restrictive covenant.
Moved by Councillor Asmunsen, second by Councillor Reamer, and I have Councillor Lynch. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. This is probably addressed.
We've got a new order here, so I'm working it out. Thank you.
Well, over here now. This might have been addressed at the committee meeting, but I wasn't there. I seem to recall before we had a application similar to this, and there was some concern as to the runoff that would be coming from the washing facility. I was wondering if that was dealt with at all, or the concern. I didn't see anything in the report that says how that was being redirected. We were at some point concerned about the residual soap and stuff going into the sewage and stuff like that.
Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Worship. No, it wasn't discussed previously with this specific application, though it is a common enough concern. If you can leave it with staff, let us check. There are ways of dealing with that sort of runoff in the storm sewer system.
Okay, so you'll get back to us on the runoff. Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is the minutes of the Engineering, Utilities and Environment Standing Committee meeting of Monday, May 17th. The recommendation to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 4 is the minutes of the Recreation, Sports and Culture Standing Committee meeting of Monday, May 17th. The recommendation is to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item of business arising out of those minutes concerns policy on community requests for leisure and parks fee reductions and contributions. The recommendation is that Council approve the community request for leisure and parks fee reductions and contributions policy.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Lynch. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 is the Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw, Bylaw 4077, and speaks to an area adjacent to 2980 Guildford Way. The recommendation is that Council give consideration to fourth and final reading of Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw number 4077.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor McDonnell. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 is a report of the Manager of Financial Services. It relates to the Coast Meridian Widening Security Issuing Resolution to support long-term borrowing for the Coast Meridian Widening Project. The recommendation is that Council approve borrowing from the MFA as part of the 2010 fall issue, and it's $3 million as authorized through Coast Meridian Widening Loan Authorization Bylaw 4094, and that Metro Vancouver Regional District be requested to consent to our borrowing over a 15-year term and include the borrowing in their security issuing bylaw.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 pertains to the 2010 by-election results. The recommendation is that Council receive the report of the Chief Election Officer entitled 2010 by-election results for information.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor Reamer. This is the results of the by-election. Does anyone want to take issue with it? Does anyone want to challenge the results? Anyone at all? Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8 pertains to an application for strata title conversion of existing commercial building, the Zone Bowling Center, located at 228 Schoolhouse Street. The recommendation is that Council, as an approving authority under Section 242 of the Strata Property Act, approve the proposed strata conversion of the existing commercial building at 228 Schoolhouse Street.
Moved by Councillor McDonnell, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Clearly, Councillor Nicholson has had a calming effect on this council. We've done everything unanimously so far. Really appreciate his participation.
The clerk will speak slower.
And all of your debate has been succinct and to the point. Mr. Clerk.
Item 9 concerns notice of motion pertaining to a smoking bylaw. The recommendation is that Council give consideration to the notice of motion originally presented by Councillor Robinson and seconded by Councillor Lynch at the January 18th, 2010 regular Council meeting. There are a series of whereas clauses, but pertaining to the therefore it be resolved. Therefore it be resolved that the City of Coquitlam develop a ban on smoking on public patios and spaces where minors might be present, and that the City of Coquitlam invite municipalities in the Metro Vancouver that have yet to develop a smoking ban to consider such a ban, and that the City of Coquitlam ask the province to consider a ban on smoking in all public places.
Thank you. That motion's moved and seconded. It's on the floor. Councillor Robinson speaking to her motion.
Thank you. I have a wonderful speaking aid that was given to me by a grade 4 student from Parkland Elementary. And I thought I would share that with you. I'm glad to see this finally come before us for some decision. And I do know that people here do care about the health and well-being of Coquitlam residents. And I do know that it's a highly charged issue. My blog and inbox have been incredibly active these last few months. There are lots of anti-smoking lobbyists out there who don't believe the science behind the health effects of secondhand smoke, and they've been particularly active. But I've also heard from a lot of non-voting Coquitlam residents who have asked me to share some of their concerns with you, and this is from one of our non-voting Coquitlam residents. Vancouver, Richmond, West Van, Whistler, and Port Moody have all developed greater smoking restrictions in their communities. They've increased buffer zones around entranceways, windows, and air intakes. They've protected public gathering spaces and outdoor customer service areas. And I would really like us to consider the same thing for our residents. I would certainly consider amendments if someone were so inclined to be a bit more specific with this notice of motion. So, for example, that we increase the no smoking buffer zone to 7.5 meters of entryways, windows, and air takes. Research notes that this is the distance the chemical particulates are more fully dissipated and pose much less risk of harm. That we ban smoking in customer service areas serving those under 16 years of age. This has just been consistent with provincial legislation because we don't sell tobacco products to those under 16, so why would we expose them to secondhand smoke? You'll notice that I haven't included drinking establishments. We don't have children there, and we know that drinking establishments have been working really hard to contain secondhand smoke. From an economic perspective, this bylaw addresses the 82% of the adult population, and hopefully close to 100% of the child population, that would prefer to spend their dollars at non-smoking establishments. So perhaps this would further enhance our local economy and keep local residents buying their coffees locally rather than going to Port Moody. The non-binding vote that we had, I think, spoke very loudly with 72% of folks asking us to consider a ban. And I have a couple of non-voting members of our community who've written me. I've got a stack of letters here, and I just thought I would read just a couple so that we have a real clear idea of what we're being asked to do. I agree that, to members of City Council, I agree that you should ban smoking in all public places. My dad and my uncle both smoke, but my dad is trying to quit, and I think some people who smoke should all quit. Some people who don't smoke might be getting cancer because of secondhand smoke. I really hope that you ban smoking in public places. People could die of cancer even if they are not smoking. I think that many people would support you if you make that decision. I'll read this other one here. Dear City Council and Mayor, I am 9 years old at Parkland Elementary in grade 4, and I want to tell you that it is a good idea to ban smoking in public places, that kids like me would be. Both of my parents smoke. I know that it is bad for you, and I know that some people are addicted to it. What I don't like about smoking is when I go to Starbucks on Como Lake, I see a bunch of people smoking and then I breathe it in. And then you know that I am breathing in secondhand smoke. But toddlers and babies walk in and out with their moms, and they too are breathing secondhand smoke that could kill them or make them sick. I have asthma. I get sick a lot, and I get asthma by secondhand smoke and other reasons, and I don't want little kids to get it. All that has changed my life. I remember times when I stayed at home for 3 to 4 weeks when I was in grade 1. I had to miss the Halloween party because I was so sick. I could not even go trick-or-treating, so please, please put that law in. P.S. If you don't, I will write another letter, and it won't be pretty. I liked this young woman. So, having said that, I hope that we will be able to...
Bullying.
And there's more like that. There are dozens more. And certainly on behalf of our non-voting residents, I think we owe this some serious consideration, and I hope we can make something happen that will protect their little bodies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, smoking is one of those habits that I guess nobody should have. It is a rotten habit. I know I smoked 3 packages a day, especially when I was in hospital for 9 months back in 1970. And you could smoke that in the hospital. You had a private room, and you did nothing else but smoke. But frankly, I'll tell you, it's a rotten habit. And I know it's not good for you. I know that, you know, people say, well, it causes cancer, and it probably does. You know, the fact is that, you know, I lost one of my kid brother here a year ago or so to cancer. Did he smoke? He never smoked a day in his life. You know, you know, and you know, my grandfather, who died at age 97, he smoked and he drank. Now I don't know what killed him, the cigarettes or the liquor. I don't know, you know, I mean, frankly, and, you know, I can understand, you know, being away from public so many meters when you're smoking in buildings. I understand that. That's a good one. But for us to try and force this, you know, on everybody at anywhere, especially in patios, when the people go to the patio in a restaurant and they order a drink, they'll have a smoke and they'll have a dinner and that type of deal, and you just don't go to the patio if it bothers you. You just don't go. There's usually only smokers get there. You go to our local Legion in here, what do you see in the patio is people in their 80s and so that go out for a beer and a cigarette. Now, is it healthy? No, it's not. Is it a good habit? No, it's not. I, for one, and if I thought for 1 minute that we can enforce this, you know, that it would be a different thing. But what we're doing is passing bylaws just to pass them, to say we did it and we did the right thing. But there's nobody to enforce them. So I got great difficulty with this bylaw. I really have. Is it a good bylaw? Yes, it is a good bylaw. I wish, matter of fact, you know, the federal government and provincial government, the federal government for sure, sells cigarettes, collects taxes on every package that's sold. So now maybe we should lobby the federal and provincial government to take all the cigarettes off all the stores, off all the shelves. They make millions of dollars on taxes on a yearly basis, and maybe that's a better way to go. But for us to go ahead and try and say, yeah, we're going to eliminate smoking, and I know probably in a few months' time we'll have maybe a bylaw passed by this council or want to be passed by some council member, the fact that there should be no drinking. You can't have a beer, you can't have a drink of liquor because it's bad for you. You know? And those are the things that really bother me. So I wish I could support this bylaw. Is it a good bylaw? Yeah. If it's enforceable, but it's not enforceable. It's not enforceable. So I can't support it.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm in favor of this. I'm in favor of expanding the language to some degree, as Councillor Robinson suggests. But before I do that, I want to talk about the enforcement issue. I think enforcement is not a problem. We don't need to have it done by bylaw enforcement officers. Last week, my wife and I were on a cruise to Bermuda. Coming into Hamilton Harbour on a beautiful morning, we were all standing way up on the forward deck. And this about 12-year-old girl piped up from directly behind me and said, "You guys are standing inside the yellow line. It says don't stand inside the yellow line. You guys are going to be in trouble." Well, we didn't move outside the yellow line because the floor felt pretty solid under my feet. But that same 12-year-old girl will tell you that you better not be smoking anywhere around where she is, and her parents will back her up. So we don't need bylaw enforcement officers to go out and tell people not to smoke. The public will look after it for us. And Councillor Robinson, I didn't capture your language. Right now, this bylaw simply calls for the city to develop a ban on smoking on public patios and spaces where minors under 16 might be present. That, I presume, directs staff to go away, prepare a bylaw, bring it back for consideration, go through that whole process. I'd like to get some idea from staff of how long that might take and whether during that process we'd have the opportunity to expand the language in the way you talked about to the 7.5 meters from doorways and accesses and so forth. And I'm not sure who on staff, but maybe the mayor will direct that.
They're not sure either. We'll go with John. Mr. Dumont.
Thank you very much. Through the mayor, we can get back to council with a quick note on that, but I would think that that would probably be something that could be prepared within the next couple months.
That was a quick note.
Thank you. And what difference would it make whether we were to amend the language tonight or when we see your first response to preparing such a bylaw? If we wanted to make it tighter, more clearly defined.
Well, I think that if it's council's wish to amend the language, it would be more productive if it was done now, and then we likely can have a better chance of hitting the mark when we come back to council.
And I would move an amendment in the language used by Councillor Robinson a little earlier, if I may.
I'm going to suggest, though, that the amendment be worded such that two options be presented to council. Council may well find themselves somewhat bound by the question they asked in a referendum, and I wouldn't mind if those two options were available when they came back from staff. So perhaps the mover could take that into account.
I think that's an excellent suggestion, Your Worship. If we could have two options as proposed, public patios and spaces where minors under 16 might be present, and the more restrictive and definitive language within 7.5 meters of doorways, windows, and air intakes, I think. And so I'd be looking for a seconder for that amendment.
Motion by Councillor Councillor Nicholson is to amend the motion that's on the floor. Is there a seconder? Seeing none. I suspect what's going to happen, it doesn't seem like it defeated. It seems more like staff will be coming back to us with a number of options at the bylaw stage. Do you have anything further? No. Thank you. This is, I put myself on the list here. I actually, this is a non-binding referendum. We went out to the public and asked their opinion on a subject, and it's non-binding because there are some particular procedures that we would have had to jump through, some hoops that we would have had to jump through to make it a binding referendum. And we opted not to, partly because of timing. But I feel bound by it I think we all voted unanimous. Everyone except Councillor Nicholson wasn't there, but everyone else was there. We voted unanimously to ask the public their opinion. I think we have to proceed at least with the motion that's before us, since we asked their opinion, and they weren't exactly equivocal on the response. 72%. That's almost 3 in 4 came back and said that those were appropriate changes, and I support them, and I'll go forward and vote in favor of them. I don't think now is the time to ask ourselves whether this is something we should do. We ask the public if it's something we should do. We should feel somewhat supported by the public's perspective on it. I actually want to applaud Councillor McDonnell, who added that element to it. Councillor McDonnell moved the motion to put forward a non-binding referendum on 2 different questions. I think it was a great test of democracy. It engaged the public a whole lot more, and I want to applaud Councillor McDonnell for that initiative. I think it provided us a lot of guidance and, as a council, a lot of comfort that the public wants us to do this. And now it's Councillor Rasmussen.
Well, thank you very much. I will be supporting this in regards to the public's comments and their opinions on this part. But I will also point out, I think Councillor Sikora pointed out quite quickly, or quite correctly I should say, is that we really can't enforce this. We're not going to have bylaws people out there. It's not possible. I had people come to me last fall in regards to people smoking within the 6 meters, as the law presently states, in a doorway, and wanting something to be done about it. So I came to staff, bylaws. Bylaws said, well, there's not much. It's a health, Fraser Health Authority would have to come in right now and deal with that issue because it's a health issue, not our bylaws people. Secondly, they said by the time any bylaw person gets there, those people who may have been smoking the cigarette are gone. So I think we have to, will not be enforced through a bylaw, through a fine, or a cents. It just isn't going to happen that way. Now, maybe it will change people's attitudes, and that's the hope. And that's about the only part we're going to be doing on this. Because some of these bylaws laws that we pass are simply not enforceable. The ones on the doorways and all that type of stuff, it's something that's there, but you can't enforce it. I've had people go up, adult people get into yelling matches with each other about it, but there's no one there to enforce it. If somebody's going to smoke within that distance, they're going to do it. So I'll support this on this part, and this is the way it is today, and move it forward, but I don't want to raise people's expectations that the city is going to be out there backing them up with their bylaws on this. That we won't be. Thank you very much.
Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. I'm supportive of this motion going forward. I echo the sentiments of some of the council that is looking at enforcement issues, and I think that that's justified. When you look at it from a senior level government downloading onto our level of government, I think you see that happening more and more, and I think this is what's happening here. I don't understand the federal government's stance. I think that they pay out a lot more money in health care costs than they ever bring in from revenue on cigarettes. And so I would like to add to this motion that in addition to sending something to the provincial government, that we also try to rub the noses of the federal government a little bit in it, and by telling them that, well, we're doing their job for them, and that they should be stepping up to the plate, leading rather than following the municipal governments in this type of action. So I would add into the motion, or to my motion, that we send a letter to the federal government stating what we've done and hoping that they will follow our initiative.
I'll second that.
There is an amendment. No, that's actually the only amendment on the floor, and I would suggest that we just simply roll it in as a comfortable thing that staff can do in any case. Copying any other level of government, I think I'm comfortable with. Any council members object to that? Seeing none, okay, I'm back to the list. You're done, Councillor McDonnell. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Well, sometimes the job that I get criticized so much for comes in quite handy. You bring up the fact that you have smoking on public patios, And you brought up one of our favorite coffee haunts. Well, they are actually on private lands, most of them, because they are always leased from some landlord. A lot of them are leased from some landlord. And I think maybe some of the landlords for some of the large shopping malls can put it in their rules and regulations when they are leasing to places that are going to have public patios where minors might be present, that there is no smoking. And I believe that although again it may not be policed as firmly as we want it to, at least when people go to rent a space within a shopping center, and the management within the lease has said, you know, we prefer that there be no smoking, or there's no smoking on the patios or whatever. I think they can look at it. This certainly isn't going to work in all situations, but for some it might. And I guess it's where the minors are going to be present. And, you know, I see us sitting here and we're trying to do all this where the moms and dads may take the babies out for an hour and stop and have coffee, and then they go home and light up. And we don't have any regulations over their private spaces, but we can encourage the landowners in our city to look at their leases when they're leasing out to restaurants and places like that. And I will be supporting it on that basis. Thank you.
Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I too am going to be supporting this smoking bylaw. The residents and citizens of Coquitlam have spoken out, and I have to respect that. When this issue first came up, I did a fair amount of research into it, and what I discovered was quite interesting. I ran into coffee shop owners in another municipality that has a smoking ban. They did not realize that there was a smoking ban, and in fact they had been allowing their clients to smoke at that particular coffee shop for quite some time. And so this just kind of shows the difficulty. Obviously nobody reported them, and obviously bylaw enforcement never stopped by. And so this sort of exemplifies the difficulty with enforcing this type of thing. But the other thing I also discovered was that many of our large restaurant chains have already taken it upon themselves to do their own smoking bans. And so I commend them for that, and I guess this is just one additional step that we're taking that will eventually see the end of this horrible habit. I do feel somewhat sorry for the smokers that we have, because they really don't have a lot of places anymore left where they can smoke other than their own private homes. And so while I'm going to support this smoking bylaw, I do send my sympathies to that particular population. Thank you.
And to those they leave behind. Councillor Lynch.
Thank you, and I'll also be supporting this. And we've already been noted as 72% votes cast, which is is representative, that is, of our population. We didn't have that big of a turnout. I think that does send a message. And I don't know what the concern is about whether this is enforceable or not. We've got lots of laws out there that we don't have bylaw officers standing by to enforce it at the drop of a hat. We don't even enforce our speeding bylaws, for that matter. So I think the idea to say, well, just because we maybe can't enforce it, that we should be saying, well, maybe we shouldn't bring it in. It's the right thing to do. It's what the residents want. There should be no problem with that. And if you go to some of the businesses in the city, specifically in Coquitlam Centre, they already have signs on their doorways saying no smoking within 3 meters. They've already gone proactive that way. So I don't see this as a big issue for us to pass a bylaw. I don't see the enforcement's going to be that huge. And we're talking about public spaces, or spaces where minors might be present. I think that's a good target to start with. We may not want to go the full gamut and expand it to 7 meters either side of either of the entrances or some of that, but I think to start with where youth, minors will be is the right thing to do, and I don't think we should be all that concerned about the enforcement, because quite frankly, if we did have a problem where there was a bunch of people smoking on a patio and the bylaw officers weren't called, they would enforce it. That's their job.
Yep, I was going to close with almost exactly the same comments. The public can always call bylaw enforcement. They do respond to complaints. In the end, I suspect any community that hasn't had enforcement on their coffee shop patios has bylaw enforcement officers that don't drink as much coffee as ours do, because I suspect ours would be there and would visit often enough that it wouldn't be an issue. Okay, no other speakers. The question is the motion as with the minor amendment related to the federal government, a letter to the federal government. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Thank you, Your Worship.
We're still unanimous.
Item 10 is also a notice of motion. It relates to the prohibition of the sale of rabbits in Coquitlam. The recommendations that Council give consideration to the following notice of motion presented by Councillor Reid and seconded by Councillor Robinson at the May 17th regular Council meeting. And this motion is that staff be directed to draft an amendment to the City's business licensing bylaw to prohibit the sale of rabbits in Coquitlam. As per our procedure bylaw, the mover has the option to speak first if she so wishes.
Just one moment, please. Go ahead, Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora promised he was going to eat all of the rabbits, so with that I had to put this forward. One of the reasons actually, it was Councillor Robinson that came up with this and discussed it with me, and knowing how much I love animals, put it forward. I've only had one person in this whole city phone asking me why I'm wasting my time, because to them it's just a total waste of time. My answer to that person is because it's my time, and I think this is a worthwhile cause. And it's also my time to do things like this that can save our taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars. If anyone hasn't been reading the paper and has seen what's gone on at the University of Victoria, there are thousands and thousands of rabbits over there, and it's just inhumane. It's caused a great division amongst staff and students, and it's just a terrible thing. We have lots of rabbits up at the shelter, and we keep getting them. Quite often people will actually capture them from the park. But if there's anyone in our city that thinks it's okay to take a little pet rabbit that's been raised in a cage and hand-fed, and then just because you're tired of it, go and dump it off in Mundy Park so it could be torn apart in 2 or 3 by a coyote, then maybe those people should move, because I have no use for them whatsoever. I've put this forward. It perhaps isn't the solution, but again, it's raising the profile. It doesn't cost us a lot of money to have this on our books, but it's a humane thing to do, and maybe someday we won't be overrun with rabbits in Mundy Park especially. So that's why I'm moving it forward.
Thank you. Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. I understand the arguments for Councillor Reid's motion. However, we're not talking about killer rabbits here. We're talking about a nice pet that people like to have, and there has to be another solution to this. And the solution that I would put forward is that instead of a prohibition on the sale of rabbits in Coquitlam, that we put a prohibition on the sale of fertile rabbits. In other words, they have to be spayed or neutered before they're sold in Coquitlam. I would support that motion, but not the prohibition of rabbits entirely in Coquitlam. So I would make that motion.
They get dumped off.
The motion is, and it sounds appropriate, or acceptable rather, it's to amend the motion to prohibit the sale of rabbits to only fertile rabbits permitted, and to prohibit the sale of fertile rabbits.
Sterilized. No, yeah, I can't sell.
Non-fertile. We got it. Okay. And that's been moved by Councillor McDonnell and seconded by Councillor Reamer. On the amendment, Councillor Reid. Just one moment, please. Your microphone's not active.
Sorry, if we could start a QB, because I think there might be a number of people who wish to speak to
the amendment.
Just the amendment. So if we take 1 second.
Okay.
We now have a QB.
Now, Councillor Reid will activate her first, because she was up first. Good.
That still doesn't prohibit them from just getting tired of the animals and dropping them off in the park. So I can't support that. All animals should be spayed or neutered, whether they're cats or kittens or dogs or whatever. But it still doesn't stop just people coming and dumping them off, and it's cruel. And I have to say that, Mr. Mayor, in deference to Councillor Sikora, who's just sitting here trying to just hold his laughter in about rabbits, because 20 years ago, we actually started with this conversation of people dumping off rabbits in Mundy Park, and it was just overrun with rabbits. Obviously now we've got more coyotes, and fat ones at that. But the next day, the two papers came out. One had Reed wants equal rights for rabbits, and the other one had Bunny bylaw bugs may. So I know Councillor Sikora is up to no good whatsoever, but I think this is quite a serious issue. I just think this is cruel and inhumane. Thank you.
Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I'm just going to read a brief excerpt out of the BCSPCA Spring Summer magazine, and the article is entitled Regulating Rampant Rabbits. And it says, domestic rabbit colonies have begun popping up in communities all across the province, resulting in unnecessary suffering for the animals, says Sarah Dubois, the BCSPCA's Manager of Wildlife Services. In addition to the immense suffering experienced by abandoned rabbits as a result of starvation, disease, and predation, the BCSPCA has also seen a rise in the number of homeless rabbits entering its shelters, caring for 795 stray and surrendered rabbits in 2009 alone. And then it goes on to say that the City of Richmond took a leadership role on the rabbit overpopulation by becoming the first municipality in BC to ban the sale. However, it also says that the City of Kelowna made a progressive move in passing a bylaw in November 2008 that requires pet stores to only sell spayed or neutered rabbits, which is exactly the amendment that Councillor McDonnell is making. So I would much prefer that compared to an overall motion to ban. And so I will fully support Councillor McDonnell's amendment. I'm just wondering about the wording of the amendment. I thought that staff be directed to draft an amendment to the city's business licensing bylaw to require pet stores to sell only neutered and spayed rabbits in Coquitlam. That was the amendment that I had come up with. Thank you.
I wouldn't want to prohibit them from selling other kinds of pets, though, and that. So we still might want to wordsmith that one, but okay, fair enough. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I've been to the campus, University of Victoria, and it is literally overrun with bunnies, and there should be no such thing as a starving student at UVic, given their access to bunnies. And my concern is that we have an opportunity here. We have wild rabbits. There's a couple that come out at dawn, right at the corner of Como Lake and Mariner, at that part of Mundy Park, and they sort of watch the traffic. You can see them when I go out for runs in the morning. So there's a lot of those bunnies in the park, and there's a lot all through Riverview Forest and right down into that school that's down there, that Riverview School. There's a whole families and families of them. So on the one hand, I think there are plenty of bunnies to go around. If people really want a pet, we can get you one. However, I want this to pass. If it doesn't look like it will pass without, at a minimum, sterilization, then I'm prepared to support it. Because to me, at a minimum, that's what I would want. Because the truth is, having a rabbit is a 12 to 15-year commitment. That's a long time for a pet, for any pet. And people let their cats go and their dogs as well, but they seem to think that the bunnies can just be just fine, and it's not the case. So I will support the amendment because at a minimum, I think that's what we need to do. I think we need to only limit the sale of sterilized rabbits.
Thank you very much. I may be the only member of council who has had rabbits in the family for many, many years. We have rescued, I think, 3 or 4 rabbits from shelters. They're wonderful pets. They're wonderful family members. But they aren't the easy pet that a lot of people think they are. They aren't unfortunately, one of the realities of the pet store rabbit is that it's an inexpensive thing. The cage probably costs more than the rabbit. And as a result, folks grab it. It seems like a neat thing around Easter, and right around summer, it's no longer a neat thing. As a spayed or neutered rabbit, we've endured the cost of that, and we know it would be a much more expensive pet to acquire. And so I'm going to support the amendment, partly because I do want this to pass. I think the proliferation of rabbits in communities across British Columbia, Kelowna, you can pull up to the main drag of Kelowna and stop your car and a rabbit will jump in. I mean, there's just all kinds of rabbits in Kelowna. And if you want to get a non-spayed or neutered rabbit, you can go up to Kelowna and just put a carrot in the back. The reality is that if folks really want them, they can find them. We should be making a stand, though, that says, no, this is it's a social issue in some communities. In Richmond, it's a significant issue. In parts of Coquitlam, it's a significant issue, and we should be trying to be as responsible as we can. And it sounds to me like Council will be heading down a path of at least requiring that they be spayed and neutered. My preference for anyone that wants a rabbit is go to the animal shelter. We've got a number of rabbits there. They're absolutely wonderful pets, and you'll know what you're getting as well, because they're adult rabbits. Councillor Secor.
Thank you, Mayor. It makes me chuckle. The fact is that this bunny rabbit discussion came up back in the 70s. Matter of fact, Jim Tunn was then the mayor. And this home on Foster Street had bunny rabbits. Now, they were away on holidays. They had 6. By the time they came back, they had 12. From holiday, they had 12. And at that time, Councillor Reid wanted to say that we should not ban bunny rabbits out of the municipality, that they should be allowed. See, now what happened, Jim Tunn, then after Councillor Reid and myself had a little debate going back and forward, he said, can I hop into this discussion? But anyways, here's the situation. The fact is that, what about the butcher shops that sell rabbits for a certain nationality for food? Certain nationality people buy rabbits. They go to a butcher shop and buy a rabbit, and I guess they'd be neutered or spayed.
So will you if you keep this up.
So the fact is that, we're really reaching in here.
I think the motion, though, was to not necessarily include grocery stores where the rabbits are actually already prepackaged.
No, but the resolution says rabbits not be sold. Well, that takes in the butcher shops and everything else. It does. There's no two ways about it, because the way it's worded.
Live rabbits.
But however, Mayor, I don't know. I guess I'll support that resolution and that type of deal. But then again, we'll have to have bylaw enforcement officers. So we'll be passing bylaws coming out our yin-yang and have bylaw enforcement officers also chasing all these crazy things. So I'm going to support it, but I'll tell you something. I think that we're really reaching quite far with this one. Thank you very much. So
no other speakers. I think we're going to count on staff who draft our bylaws to word it such that the sale of dead rabbits is actually not prohibited. Okay. Any other questions? Nope. All in favor of the amendment? Sorry, let's clear it up. The amendment is to change it to be only to permit the sale of spayed or neutered rabbits. That's the amendment. Amendment's on the floor. All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Councillor Reid makes it not unanimous, but...
Are these rabbits going to be licensed?
Okay, so the motion on the floor now is amended to be that we prohibit the sale of rabbits unless they've been spayed or neutered. That would be live rabbits. We're back to QA.
That is correct.
Now, on the amended motion, Councillor McDowell is on the list. Do you want to speak? No. Councillor Secor is on the list on the amendment.
No, I'm fine.
You're good.
Thank you.
Councillor Reid is on the...
I only want the total prohibition or nothing, so...
Yes, understood. And Councillor Lynch you're good?
Nope. I was just going to say that this conversation, this debate, mirrors a fair bit of what happened at the local government association meetings that we have all go, and we came forward with the same thing to to prohibit the sale of rabbits. It was amended to change it so that the sale would just be that we'd have to have them spayed or neutered. I should say that there's a Canadian pet industry and advisory council that put out a letter on this, and they too say that the idea isn't to prohibit the sale of rabbits, because they say they're just going to get, and I really don't think prohibiting the sale of rabbits is going to address the concern that Councillor Reid brought up, and that is people letting the rabbits loose afterwards. Just because you can't buy them in Coquitlam doesn't mean you can buy them someplace else and then let them off in our park. So I think this is a safe way to go. I think that it's setting a standard in the city, and I think that's the best that we can hope for this time.
Very good. Councillor Robinson?
I also want to echo what Mayor Stewart had said before that I think is a really good point. Right now they're inexpensive pets, but if they have to be neutered first, it increases the price. And so people will give it a second or third or fourth thought before they actually make that purchase. And I'm hopeful that that will actually be reflected in the number of people who choose to purchase rabbits. I would certainly, though, first hope that they check the shelter, because I think that's the first place they ought to go to get a rabbit. But I think that that would serve the purpose. Fewer people will be purchasing rabbits, and it will minimize any risk that we have as a community of having rampant wascally wabbits in our parks. Thank you.
I was wondering if we were going to be able to resist that, but apparently not. So, the motion as amended. All in favor? Opposed? You're opposed to... Okay. Councillor Reid is opposed. The motion carries.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 11 is the Metro Vancouver Board and Brief, for which we have the board representatives available to respond to questions. The recommendation is to receive it for information.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Your Worship, that's the last formal item on the agenda. There are no onward transmittal items, so I guess it leaves it to around the table, followed by adjournment and a question period.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Sikora to adjourn. I'd ask, Councillor Nicholson.
Sorry, I was trying to. A little slow to get to around the table.
On the question of adjournment. Go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to take just a moment to thank all of Council and thank all of staff for welcoming me back so heartily. You all know, I think, that I've been paying close attention to Council for quite a long time now. I learned a great deal from every one of you and from the staff sitting watching Council meetings. One of the things I learned is that we on Council can work together better than may have been my previous experience. I've seen some examples of that. I intend to try to follow them. I look forward to working with all of you as colleagues. To illustrate, though, that I did pay attention to what was going on here and that I learned something from each and every one of you, Councillor Robinson began what I hope might become a council tradition of coming back and reporting on what I learned on my holiday that I might apply in council by showing you a picture of a single tree. And I've got a couple of photographs that Jay might put up the first one now if he... We'll see how well this works. That's the City Hall in Hamilton, Bermuda. It's a really lovely building. And while we were in Bermuda, my wife gave me about a 40-minute pass from retailing. And I decided to go and see what I could learn about municipal government in Hamilton, Bermuda, and I found out that there's always, this is what hangs in that City Hall. We spend a lot of time worrying about the oppressive attitude of senior governments and how we get along with Metro Vancouver and the province and all our neighbors. Things in Bermuda seem a little tougher for them right now in Hamilton than we have it here in the city of Coquitlam, so I think we can remember that there's always somebody who's got it a little tougher than we do. And that's the point that I wanted to make. Thank you.
There you go. Well, thank you very much. And before we vote on that, I also wanted to tell you all where there's a shortage of ONEG blood. If you have that, 888-2donate, please. Seeing no other comments, the motion is to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. And keeping with our tradition, Now that the by-election is over, we are able to welcome any questions for a question period on tonight's agenda. Seeing none, thank you all for coming. Have a good evening.